We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. We must remember always that accusation is not proof, and that conviction depends upon evidence and due process of law. We will not walk in fear one of another. We will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason if we dig deep in our history and our doctrine, and remember that we are not descended from fearful men, not from men who feared to write, to speak, to associate, and to defend causes that were for the moment unpopular.
For me, free speech is about being able to express myself without too many filters. And it would seem like we have more free speech, right? Like anyone can post to Facebook or Twitter and get their message out there, but we censor ourselves so much and we get censored. So maybe there's less free speech than we think.
For me, free speech is less about saying whatever I want without consequences, which obviously is a right afforded to me as an American citizen by the First Amendment, but more about my right to hear alternative points of view. I want to hear differences of opinion, no matter how controversial a particular majority might consider those opinions.
Free speech means to me be able to say what you want without fear of reprisals. Like, you should be able to say what you want, how you want, whenever you want.
Free speech is one of the most fundamental parts of being an American. I immigrated here from Mexico when I was 12 months old, and I grew up learning that America is a land where you can express yourself, where you could pretty much be anything you want. And of course, expressing yourself is the core of everything that we do here. And if you can't express yourself, you can't really do anything.
Free speech, I think when you think the term free speech, you think almost like the US Constitution. I don't read that rag at all. But in general, free speech means I want to say something where I'm not afraid of the consequences. That doesn't mean I want to say something bad about someone and not be afraid about them being mad at me. In general, I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but I want to say what's on my mind, what I believe, what I think, what I feel, without completely irrational criticisms trying to... Actually, you know what? I don't even care about anybody criticizing me. I just want to say what I think and feel, and I don't care about the rest. That's free speech. When I speak, it's free. No one's paying me for it.
I think in America these days, and actually I'm going to expand it a little further than that, I think the West in general is being silenced by each other, frankly. Being silenced by each other. Social justice warriors, people who are afraid of being considered not PC or being called racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever you want. Right wing is constantly going after the left wing is going after the right wing and the left wing. It's kind of crazy. I mean, all bets are off. I mean, to me, I don't even understand what's unacceptable anymore because everything seems to be to somebody.
I'm Pax Dickinson. We are in the beautiful country of northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm the CTO of WeSearcher.com. I was formerly the CTO of Business Insider, and then I was fired for my tweets. I had a Twitter. I tweeted a lot of jokes, a lot of like, kind of edgy stuff. I got in a lot of fights with feminists. I have strong political opinions about tech and about innovation. I don't think diversity. If you have diversity as your highest value, then you don't have innovation as your highest value anymore, like by definition. So I would get in fights about that, and I got in some fights about the tit stare controversy, which was a thing at TechCrunch. Some kids made a joke presentation about an app called Tit Stare that would let you stare at women's tits, and they were kidding, and I thought it was pretty funny. Maybe crass, maybe not the right kind of humor for the audience, but certainly not like misogyny, which is what it was labeled as, misogyny. So I pushed back against that, and I said, misogyny is, beating women up and hating women, and liking boobies is kind of by definition not misogyny. Like, you like boobies, how is that misogyny? Valleywag wrote a post about my tweets and said, "Is this the kind of person that Business Insider wants to have as CTO?" And the entire internet exploded. I was trending for a couple days. It was pretty surreal. At the time, I had been under a lot of stress at work. I had probably a million things on my plate. I was getting like eye twitches, involuntary eye twitches from my stress just from my stress at my job. And so then I was fired, and I suddenly I didn't have any of those problems. They all became someone else's problem. And I only had one problem, that, I was fired and I had no job, and everyone in the whole world hated me. So like a bunch of strangers talking shit about me really doesn't bother me. But yeah, I mean, it affected my mom was very upset. My wife was very upset. It's hard on the whole family. Like, it's absolutely, yeah. I mean, to hear your husband or your son or something like, have these things said about him, it was like very hard for people. I think it was worse for my wife and my mom and some other people in my family than it was for me.
My passion is freedom of speech, right, left, center. I'll defend anybody who is charged with anything for having expressed views, even views I most fundamentally disagree with, like Nazis marching through the streets of Skokie deliberately because it was a neighborhood of Holocaust survivors. I hate them. I was rooting for them to slip on banana peels and bash their skulls in, but I'm not going to let the government become censors. The best answer to falsehood and bigotry is truth and equality. You have to be able to compete in the marketplace of ideas.
But the point of ideas being freely expressed is what's protected by the First Amendment from the government. That, however, does not mean the First Amendment protects us from each other. Have something to say, somebody doesn't like it, they can call you ugly, stupid, whatever. You get to speak your mind, so do they. You get to say your thoughts, so do they. Maybe their thoughts are that your thoughts are stupid. You don't want them to say that? Don't be stupid.
Other types of censorship is an issue where people will say, we're no longer going to sponsor this television show because this host said something, and we're asking other corporate entities not to do it. It is a way for the public to use their dollars, because censorship in that fashion, other than the government, is really an economic way of handling disagreements with speech.
There are limitations. You can't engage in child pornography. You can't use what's called fighting words, which is basically inciting someone to imminent violence. Aside from that, there aren't a lot of limits within the First Amendment. It's there to basically protect the worst speech. If it was only about good speech, it wouldn't need any protection. We all love good speech. It makes us happy. We want to hear it all the time. It's the speech you don't want to hear that needs protection, and that's why it's there.
Look at Chick-fil-A. What happened there? That's a great example of half the world said, we're going to Chick-fil-A tomorrow because this guy seemingly doesn't like homosexuals, which wasn't actually the case. He just doesn't support gay marriage. And other people said, I'll never go there again. So that's kind of a form of censorship, saying, listen, if you say what you're going to say, that's fine. We can't stop you, but we can definitely economically help and hurt you by what you say.
I'm an immigrant. Let me just start with that. So I think especially for first generation or not even first generation immigrants, the U.S. embodies freedom, and one of those freedoms is free speech. I think it's something that you take for granted as an American, especially as an immigrant. Maybe not for granted, but it's part of what comes with adopting this homeland. So I'm a Muslim female criminal defense attorney born in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and I come here and I can say whatever I want.
My name is Andrew Auernheimer. I am currently in the Kharkov Oblast of East Ukraine, and I am a crowd-funded nationalist activist.
There are many forms of censorship, all of which hurt a society. The worst, of course, is, what Stalin and Hitler did. You speak, you get killed. Others are, you speak, you get excommunicated from the church. You speak, you get expelled from the university. You speak, you lose your job. The other form of censorship, other than government and institutional censorship, which is the worst, is self-censorship. And that is when people are so afraid of what others will say about them that they self-censor.
What does free speech mean to me? That's such an irrelevant question, right? Like, well, it doesn't matter what it means to me. It matters what it is, right? There's no feelings about liberty. It's not something that we have feels about. It's an objective fact. Is that you either have the right to speak freely or you don't. And it's not about what it means to me. It's about what it is.
You can't just say we can censor the right. Once you give authority to censor the right, it becomes authority to censor the left. Once you give authority to censor hate speech, who defines hate speech? Hate speech is in the mind, heart, soul, and history of the listener. What is hateful to one might not be hateful to another. One of my favorite Supreme Court decisions involved a young man who was opposed to the Vietnam War and walk into court with a jacket that said F, and then he filled in the 3 letters after that, the draft. And he was prosecuted. And Justice Harlan, who was the most Brahmin and respected and conservative person on the court, said that, one man's obscenity is another man's lyric.
So I'm sure you've interviewed lots of people, and I'm sure all of them have said all sorts of things about free speech, but the reality is that I'm imagining none of them were tortured over it, and the reality is that I was kidnapped from my home, my childhood home, at gunpoint, and bankrupted and turned into a refugee because I believe in free expression and truth is the long and short of it. I had been a target of the federal government for a long time, and I was a target of the federal government because I had said true things about race. That there's a plan to wipe white people off the face of the earth, and that white Christians and white pagans are superior to other races and religions. That there's an inherent value into having nations where whites are supreme, just as blacks are supreme in Africa, just as Asians are supreme in Asia. And you're not allowed to say these things in Western civilization. There's very large structures to make sure that nobody expresses these ideas very freely.
Censorship, once it begins, spreads like a virus.
The reality is that the non-white people don't believe in liberty. They never did. They never will. They have no desire to see liberty. And they're mad because we're giving that to them whether they like it or not, because the world is very interconnected now, and that every single country in the world has all the liberties of any country that's connected to it. And this is the non-whites are not happy about this at all, because that means if there's free speech in America, then free speech is just an internet connection away, right? And they want to make sure that this doesn't happen.
The answer to bad speech is good speech. The answer to false speech is true speech. The answer to hate speech is unhateful speech. You have to be able to respond. It's essential to a democracy that people not only have the ability to respond, but the willingness to respond, the determination to respond. If you say that people are entitled to engage in hate speech, and they are, then you have an obligation to answer that hate speech. You cannot simply defend someone's right to say hateful things without yourself getting into the marketplace and defeating their hateful ideas in the open marketplace.
So we need more chutzpah.
We always need more chutzpah. Everybody can use a little bit of chutzpah. And the First Amendment presupposes chutzpah.
The roots of European tradition are these sort of ritualized insult battles. These things where we're going to tell people what we really think of them. it's since the dawn of our civilization. It's our heart and our soul, and to toss that away is just to become a fucking Muslim or gook or Jew. Or these are the kinds of people that didn't have ritualized insults in their heritage. It's the end of European civilization to give up free expression.
And you just can't have rules that say if it's offensive, it's subject to being banned. Because, first of all, it gives people an incentive to say they're offended if they want to censor speech. And it increases the level of offensiveness that people feel. So what we have to do is tell people to develop thick skins, responsive abilities to answer hate speech, but not censorship. Don't allow censorship under any circumstances.
My name is Father John Backus, and I'm Dean of the St. Sophia Cathedral, the Greek Orthodox community here in Los Angeles and in Southern California.
I am Rabbi Moshe Taub. I'm the rabbi of the Young Israel of Holliswood, which is a small community inside Queens. Beautiful community.
The whole issue of freedom is the key in Christianity, certainly in ancient Christianity to today. Whether it's Christianity or Judaism, the greatest free speech proponents and thinkers were the ancient prophets of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, who often spoke certain truths, certain revealed truths, when they were not very comfortably received by the population. So they were free, but they also took responsibility for their speech, because oftentimes what they said was something that was good for the people. And that's why what they said and believed still remains to us in Scripture. This also is true in Christianity. The apostles, even in times of autocratic imperial government, spoke freely, but they spoke in the context of their faith.
Free speech means everything. I always tell my children and ask them and challenge them what the greatest human invention was. And if you ask that to students, and I teach students, you get any number of answers: television, radio, cars. But to me, it's obvious that the greatest human invention, the one that gave birth to all other human inventions, was the Gutenberg press. It was what gave birth to every other piece of information that came after. Because without the ability to communicate words, without the ability to put onto paper and easily copy and sell and give out material of information, we would not be here today. We wouldn't have a video to record ourselves on, transportation to get here. Words is us. It's not just a value. It represents everything that we are, everything that we have been, and where we're going in the future.
As an American, of course, free speech is guaranteed in our Constitution, but I think subtly it also implies that free speech has to be backed up by some sense of responsibility, some sense of dignity. So free speech may be called free, but in a society of 330 million people, it has to also have some restraint. Otherwise, what is free speech for one individual may indeed harm another individual, and this is where I think civic order and civic responsibility plays in. I'm not going to get into cliches about the fire in the theater. No, the idea is that free speech is intended to be free, responsible speech. And from that point of view, everyone has that right. But once the speech is delivered, the spoken word, one has to take responsibility and certain consequences for it as well, because others have the right of free speech to criticize what was originally initiated by the first character.
Judaism sees that dividing line, that we may have our rules, but we are uniquely qualified to testify to human history, have seen the danger when other parents come in, when governments come in, or social constructs come in that limit our ability to do what we need to do. We are, and we have been coined as the people of the book. We believe strongly in a healthy, vociferous dialogue of ideas. And during these dialogues, everything is on the table. The danger of a government or of a social construct becoming poisoned, becoming corrupted, and creating an inability for free exchange of ideas, we have seen the danger within that.
The apostles spoke freely in the context of the faith, of their new faith, in the context of the commandments that Jesus gave to them, but they were very careful, and I think they remembered Jesus' words, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. So I think the old prophets and the apostles and the disciples of Jesus spoke freely and boldly, and they were prepared to accept the responsibility of that freedom, that speech, in an unfree society of the Roman Empire, and they were willing to pay for the consequences, oftentimes being stoned, being jailed, being ostracized, but they kept to their belief.
Judaism does have dictum after dictum and rule after rule, restricting among ourselves certain types of speech, recognizing the dangers, say, of gossip. That being said, one of the greatest rabbis in the history of Judaism, one of the greatest Talmudic rabbis, for which we owe not just our legal system and contract law and torts and laws of damages and acquisition, but so much of the mystical side of Judaism. He spent many, many years hiding in a cave. And the Talmud tells us the events that preceded that. Why was he hiding in a cave with his son? And it tells us of a dialogue the rabbis were sitting and talking. And he made a statement. The Romans, look around, they're building all of these bridges. You know why they're building these bridges? Because they want to collect the tolls. And that was it. The Romans heard that he made that statement, that quasi-YouTube comment, something that we take for granted, that we say today without even thinking. And they wanted to kill him.
Any message is going to be contradicted and criticized no matter what it is today, because with Facebook and the social media and tweets and what have you, Jesus Christ could levitate and appear here, and it could be on YouTube, and someone would say it was a magic trick from Hollywood.
The idea explosion that has happened due to the availability to communicate. As I pointed out, the greatest human invention being the Gutenberg press. The Gutenberg press caused this explosion until literally the explosion in the late 60s that took us to the moon. That goes all the way back to that form of communication. And now that led to Twitter and the internet and Facebook. There is no way to put the genie back in the bottle.
To me, religion is like a sharp knife. You can either use it to put butter and jelly on a piece of bread, or you can use it to cut someone's throat. It is how you use it. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it has been used by some and called it, holy war or holy whatever. There's no such thing as something that is holy that destroys one of God's creatures, meaning human beings that are made in His image and likeness.
I'm Dr. Michael Goldberg. I started off as a board-certified pediatrician, but as my wife jokes, changed my career into working with neuroimmune, which has become what they call autism, ADHD variants, a lot of neurocognitive function in children that is really going to be a medical disorder, not a psychological disorder, and that has been my battle.
So in science, free speech is of paramount importance. And that's because in science, all truth is provisional. In science, there are no absolute truths. Science isn't religion. We believe a thing so long as there is evidence for the hypothesis. But science is replete with ideas that were absolutely believed being overthrown. And if in science we think that anything is unsayable, that's an unscientific proposition.
Well, this is unfortunately become an outright, I would dare say, mitigated medical disaster, because we are all taught in medical school you cannot have an epidemic of a developmental or genetic disorder. It is scientifically impossible. And yet, as the numbers have climbed, 1 or 2 per 10,000, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500, 1 in 250, we're now at 1 in 50, 2% of children being mislabeled autism. And this system, per se, is just acting like we didn't count these children right in the past. That's the start of sciencey criticism. Well, we're not really going to look at the problem because we don't believe we missed the problem.
In science, we have to allow what is sometimes called the free marketplace of ideas to function, so that the best ideas may be tested against the evidence, and if they can no longer be justified on the data, they have to be thrown out.
To illustrate the magnitude of this, I graduated UCLA, Dr. Lovas, expert in autism. I was politely told if I saw one autistic child in my lifetime of practice, it was going to be one too many. Essentially, most pediatricians now have 6 or 12 of these children, and the truth is they're not autism. The truth is they are what we've been trying to validate, a neuroimmune medical disorder. These children are not compatible with Dr. Kanner's definition that you were never affectionate, you were never normal as a child. If the system would just go back to that definition, 99.9% of these children wouldn't fit, and we would have to figure out what's wrong with them.
Yeah, I think that there is, science is a very consensus-building enterprise. And in general, the reason why I think we, as a community of scientists, are very skeptical whenever somebody sort of goes against the grain of scientific orthodoxy is that, well, most of the times they are kooks. So you do have situations like the anti-vaccine movement, in which there will be complete denial about evidence that weighs very heavily on the side of please vaccinate your children. So for that reason, there is a culture of silencing these voices that tend to be skeptical towards the current consensus.
The fact that after 25 plus years, there is no pressure within our system to figure out maybe they've missed something has become an outright disgrace and part of the loss of freedom in this country.
In the history of science, you've seen people have had the right ideas, but at the time that they came up with it, they were considered heretics. It happened to Galileo, to Darwin, many of the great scientists. So there is some level of self-censorship in science. Ultimately, there's this idea that the evidence will sort of will liberate us from and sort of show us the truth of the way. But the history of science is very different, especially when you're in that moment in time, when you were that first one that sort of found something or thought something that was that sort of deviates from the consensus right now. There is some level of silencing of that, and we might be preventing nuggets of truth from reaching the surface, sooner than they can.
There's normally been about a 17-year gap between academics and clinical medicine, so there's always room for mistake in the beginning. The problem is this mistake is now 25, 30 years old, no coming together to fix it, and unfortunately, it's impossible to give a rational answer for why this is happening. The costs of medicine are skyrocketing. The amount of children and adults disabled is skyrocketing. Nobody's benefiting, except maybe the tertiary medical centers that are filled with people with complex illness.
Because there are people in power that have always sought to influence things towards certain outcomes. That's the problem with lobbying in our government.
And the trouble here, and I think this goes across society too, is you have experts in medicine choosing to ignore or not pay attention to logic or science. There is nothing in my training that set me up for that ever.
There was a idea that for the last 40 or 50 years was spread with absolute conviction that the appropriate food groups emphasized carbohydrates and minimized fats. And that diet, of eating tons of breads and sugars and starches while minimizing fats, and turned out to be exactly the wrong thing to eat. Our epidemic of obesity is, to some degree, directly related to that.
And in the world we're living in medicine, you don't want to go up against that system. Instead of the right to practice medicine, the right to be a clinician, they are deliberately coming down on anybody who does something differently. So it's been very interesting as I have children doing better. Almost uniformly, the pediatricians will tell the parents, we don't understand this, but your kid's doing very well. Keep doing what you are. Dr. Goldberg is not doing anything to harm your child. And what I've gotten to is if the switch at the top acknowledged these children were ill, they're not developmental, they're not genetic, they could be fixed. I think there are multiple pediatricians and even more pediatric subspecialists who would be ready to help. This is, forgive me, part of the frustration, where after 25 years, the system keeps studying autism. I went and spoke to a high-level pediatric clinician in a university expressing these frustrations. Didn't take that gentleman 2 hours or 2 days. In 15, 20 minutes, he instantly said, what we're talking about is an underlying disease, I would say complex immune, complex viral, giving a child ASD symptoms, a phenotype of autistic-like symptoms, but not autism. As a medical physician, I can say, one, we're losing good doctors. Doctors are notorious. When I came into practice, we're not unionized. We don't work together very readily. We're independent thinkers. So as this system has tried to stop independent thinking, good people don't want to go into medicine. And when we talk children, while autism gets the attention, 2% of children now, the truth is, most teachers will tell you 20, 30% of their class are space cadets. They can't think straight, they're dark circled, they're ill. And if we keep losing 20, 30% of children, who's left to produce in the future? We are undermining the social welfare, health education of this entire country.
Well, just as a setup, I never set out to draw Muhammad. I never knew there was a prohibition against it. But in 2006, 2005, when the Danish cartoonist did it, I was like, wait, you can't draw Muhammad? And what did I do? Naturally, I drew Muhammad. And then I drew him a number of times over the years, and then I heard about this contest that Pamela Geller had with Robert Spencer and AFDI, and it was in Breitbart. It was a story in Breitbart who said $10,000 to draw Muhammad. I said, well, I've been drawing him for years for free anyway. Why not, hopefully get paid for it. So I drew him a number of times, and I was drawing him, and I said, wait a minute, how about if I have him threatening me to not draw him? And it just was a little revelation. I was like, pretty cool. So he says, with a sword, you can't draw me. And I said, well, that's why I draw you. That's exactly why I draw him. You're not going to tell an American what they can or can't draw. Anyone who loves the truth, who loves free speech and freedom. So I entered the contest, and I made it in the top 10. I won a People's Choice Award. And then I was invited to go to the event, the actual exhibition in Texas, in Garland. And I asked, did I win? I said, well, I can't tell you, but be there. I said, okay, I will. Proud to be there. So I went there, and I was announced as the winner. as I put it in my speech, I said, why do we have this kind of security? And basically because Islam does not mean peace. That's why we have this kind of security. And then we heard about the attack, and we were taken in the back of the room in this one area, and the security guards, I was flanked by them. They told me, you're the artist, okay, come here. And I found out from a security guard that a guy blew their heads off and had this incredibly intense, feeling of justice. And I tweeted after, I said, they came to kill us and die for it. Justice. And the only ones who died that night were the ones who were coming to kill us. And I thought it was just absolute just and absolute, what a great ending. Take out two evil scumbags after celebrating free speech.
Since I started writing about Donald Trump, my speaking invitations have almost completely stopped.
Really?
Yeah. So I would say in terms of income, I would say that articles by Gawker and Jezebel, which are largely made up, probably took 40% off my income. It was a little hard going from creator of beloved cartoon to most hated person on the internet on any given Thursday, based on what somebody has taken out of context from something I've said. But on the other hand, I kind of like it. All right, the type of jobs that I'm drawn to, they have an element of danger, and that danger creates attention. The attention creates energy, and then I have to see if I can do something useful with it. I never anticipated as much backlash as I've gotten, because as I've said before, the things I get in trouble for are not the things I actually think or say. They're the things that people imagined I thought, or imagined I said, or saw something out of context. So you don't really predict those with accuracy. I'm getting better at predicting what someone can take out of a context, and so I try to avoid it, but it's getting harder. Honestly, I don't think the average citizen should fight for free speech, because they're going to lose. All right? The average person who just wants to keep their job, if I were giving them advice, I'd say keep your head down.
Everyone has a favorite right. Everyone has a favorite liberty. And perhaps it's inevitable that as a journalist, I should care most about free speech, because free speech is my living. But at the same time, I think I can make a valid argument that free speech is the paradigmatic freedom. Free speech is the first freedom. And that without free speech, there can be no open society at all.
And it started as a parody of this guy called Jeff Jarvis, who is an actual professor of new media. And he'd written a really bad book, just completely half-baked, silly. And that kind of tipped me over into thinking, well, someone's got to make fun of these people. So I created this account called Prof. Jeff Jarvis. So I wrote a piece for Esquire called Why I'm Joining the Innovation Party. Yes, why I'm joining the Innovation Party. And this piece was talking about how much we can improve society by having everything smartphone enabled. You can crowdsource drone strikes. Citizens can decide whether to fire the predator or not. You vote to make the call instead of having a human president make the call. You could have location-based services. So if the government needed to resettle you to a different state, they could just see where everyone is on the phone. They could move them that way. So it's a ridiculous article, but the actual Jarvis got very upset and shot emails to all the top suits of the publication and had it pulled. I asked them, but basically I think no one's going to talk about it. He claimed that it was an editorial decision, but it doesn't make any sense. I can't believe that. I don't think any good editor would pull a piece that has no legal problems, that there's no reason to pull.
I don't really believe that free speech should just be about blather. I think it should be about getting to the essence of things. The point of being free is to be at your best.
Free speech right now is in two states at once. When the internet first took off in terms of being accessible to everyone, a lot of us were excited. Like, we're going to have a voice for everyone, and there'll be free speech, unrestrained by governments, and there'll be a global conversation, and we'll get different points of opinion, and we'll all learn so much, and we'll enlighten one another. Well, a lot of that has happened, but what's also happening, especially lately, is that some people have found that the internet is the ultimate bully machine.
So we were the first to break the name of the woman who lied in the University of Virginia rape case. We were the first to identify the Sony hack being an insider, not North Koreans. That led to the FBI coming to my home, which was kind of fun. We've broken a number of stories related to the U.S. political elections. We're the first ones to talk about Scott Walker dropping out.
I think even the most vicious, serious, angry, hateful racists need to be allowed to speak their mind, because if they don't speak their mind, you're just forcing them underground.
It's really ironic. In fact, in the last week, I've been talking to the people who published a very popular bestseller in Germany. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Thilo Sarrazin, and it sold millions of copies in Germany alone. And it's about the self-destruction of Germany. And it's a very timely book. In light of the Merkel-related migrant invasion, you would think that it would be snapped up instantly by any major U.S. publisher. And yet, they cannot find a single English language publisher among all the major publishers in both the U.S. and the U.K. who are willing to publish it.
Well, in Russia, the media has really been sequestered, under Putin in the last 15 years. And, they've blocked sites and they've shut down newspapers, or they fire people or whatever. But, in some ways, Russians are more serious about politics. They're more educated about history. And so there's more of a life there. There's more, you sense they make their own freedom, and you feel there's more of a life. You'll see 30 people gather in front of the KGB building, it's now called FSB, and they'll seriously talk about, what's wrong with that outfit, what's the history of the secret police, and they'll have a very serious, fully free conversation, which they'll upload to YouTube.
When I was a journalist and I was really into, the grunge and all that kind of music of my time, alternative music, and then I started to question some of this. Smashing Pumpkins, for instance, when they first came out, and I was a teenager and I really liked them, but I started to see there was more to it toward the corporate back end of, say, the record label and what they would do with every album that came out. I saw that it was like an image. It was fake. And Billy Corgan is a person, he kind of fascinates me, and it's interesting. He's a very prolific songwriter. But I started to see a fakeness about it. And it might not have been just them. It was certainly the record label pushing this, but I found that I couldn't speak that. I was getting press all over the place as a journalist, covering rock stuff, but I saw that if I wanted to criticize certain bands, well, these papers and these magazines are not going to print that.
What I do see is a new kind of lazy, throwing your hands up journalism of, I'm not going to do any reporting on this political figure. I'm just going to post a bunch of things people tweeted about him or her.
My general sense, though, is that the more fragile an organization is, the more likely it will be to collapse in the coming era. And the more anti-fragile you are, to borrow the Nassim Taleb, the writer's phrase, the better off you'll be. So all these people who are working really hard to be number 2 or number 3 in some organization, and then that organization's revenue is collapsing, like the Wall Street Journal editorial page, for instance, they're going to discover rather quickly that the future that they had in mind is not going to be so good financially.
The publishing industry is in a bad place because they're totally against certain points of view, and in publishing there is an attack on certain types of free speech. For instance, big publishing hates the dead white male. And right now I'm not dead yet, but they want me to be dead.
My basic attitude is we got to keep breaking news, because news is how people are red-pilled, and news is how people discover the truth. We've got to keep breaking rules, because he who sets the rules sets the politics.
The Sad Puppies is a literary revolution in science fiction. And what happened is that since the year 2000 or so, science fiction has increasingly been invaded by social justice warriors and diversity advocates and feminists who are intent on changing the definition of what science fiction is. And we saw it really start happening in 2000 when an utterly forgettable feminist romance in space was inexplicably named the best novel in science fiction that year at the Nebula Awards. And since then, we've seen the corruption spread to the more prestigious Hugo Awards. And so back in 2013, a conservative author named Larry Correia launched a campaign to basically challenge the primacy of the left in science fiction. What it essentially is it's a revolt against the gatekeepers.
And I think we should continue telling the truth about what's going on in the society, and not just, like in a courageous sense. It's not enough to just talk about how important freedom is. It's important to use that freedom to talk about things that are true.
We are blessed in that we are free because we have those freedoms. The problem is we don't use them. I think in other countries, they won their freedoms the hard way by going to jail, going to the gulag or whatever. And so they really value, their Facebook is really serious. I mean, the entire war in Ukraine, you can read about it on Facebook. All of the soldiers, the ministers, the journalists, they're all on Facebook, and they just say what they want to, okay? There's nothing like that here.
We lose knowing that we're not alone. That we're not the only one who feels this way. That we're not the only one who has this problem. That we're not the only one going through what we're going through. That we're not the only one that something really bad has happened to.
I was working for Sirius XM satellite radio. I mean, their whole thing was, hey, uncensored, this is great. No FCC, no federal guidelines. I don't know what you could say. So naively, I believed that meant you could express yourself openly and honestly without any strings attached. Oh, silly. This, by the way, my problem didn't even happen on the air. It happened off the air during my own time. I was going through Times Square, taking some pictures. I have a nice Canon camera, nice long lens. It was 4 in the morning. Beautiful time to take pictures of a completely lit up Times Square with no one on the streets. It's kind of odd looking and beautiful. So I was doing that, and a woman was walking away and heard the shutter snapping and assumed I was taking pictures of her. I wasn't. She turns around, comes at me. It was a black woman, and she goes, hey, you white motherfucker, you taking pictures of me? I said, no. I heard you. She starts smacking me in the face. I'm like, what the fuck? She's just smacking me around. I'm trying to protect myself. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't hitting her. I was trying to block her punches. I was very angry at this, obviously. Being assaulted, it was assault. When I walked away from the situation and went right to Twitter and commented on what happened. I called her behavior savage, because it was. It was this instantaneous jump to violence. I said that. And I guess my biggest problem was that I decided to throw some social commentary about some of the problems the black community faces with violence. Now, this has been thrown all over the place by reverends, church leaders, community leaders, police, politicians. This isn't a secret. You go into some of the inner cities, there is a problem with violence. I'm not breaking any new ground here. So I tweeted that. I didn't use any racial epithets. I just stated what had happened and how angry I was. Now, these were words that I used on Twitter. I didn't use any violence. I didn't use any physical violence when I was there. Funny enough, I was legally carrying a gun at the time. And it wasn't even an issue. I never thought for a second I should shoot this person, because it was ridiculous. She was just smacking me around a little bit. I didn't feel my life was being threatened. This wasn't a big deal. People said, why didn't you call the cops? I'm like, I'm not going to call the cops and say some woman, probably a hooker, was beating me up in Times Square. It happened. I was pissed. I figured the best thing to do is express myself. The worst thing I could have done
was express myself. Some people got wind of my tweets, started tweeting them around, Gawker being one of them, a few of the other usual suspects, and decided to send some emails to my boss over at Sirius. They saw it and saw some of the Gawker headlines, which were racist comments made by DJ, shock jock, whatever they wanted to call me. And they decided that they didn't like the tone of my tweets.
You see this story with Anthony Cumia. So he got in trouble for some tweets and then was fired for being a racist. That's what's on the surface. What really happened is the accountants, the money guys are looking at the Excel spreadsheet and they go, whoa, whoa, who's this? That's a guy named Howard Stern. 90 million? No, we got to cut him. We can't cut him. He pays all our bills. All right, let me keep going here. And then they're starting to see numbers like 1 million and 500,000. They go, who are these guys? And they go, we'd love to get rid of them, but they have contracts. Then Anthony sends out those tweets where he goes, there's a big problem with violence in the black community, and this woman is a fucking disgusting savage who punched me in the face for taking a picture of her. All pretty reasonable as far as I'm concerned. Then they go, ooh, this is a great opportunity, right? I don't know how much Anthony made, but let's say it's $1 million. Let's fire him, right? We look like heroes because he was seen as a racist. So we'll use them, their shrill screaming to make us look heroic. Now we take this $1 million, I give half to you two co-hosts to keep you happy, and we just made $500,000 profit.
The danger of the self-censoring is when we fear backlash, we're going to try to stay on the right side of the line.
And that is what really disturbs me about this kind of stuff is you can do all these dirty tricks behind the curtain of social justice.
And the second you let someone else tell you what to say and then you're quiet because of it, you have lost really the most human thing there is, and it's your job to fight that. I don't know how it became my job to fight it, but it somehow did.
It means everything. I mean, if you can't say what you want to say, what you're feeling, then what's the point of any of it, you know? And I think when it comes to free speech, it's one for all and all for one. I don't care what you're talking about. I still say you got the right to say it.
You don't need permission now to get your message out. This very documentary funded via social media. We didn't have to go anywhere and beg people for money. We didn't need some gatekeeper to give us permission to publish our thoughts and to share our thoughts with the world. That's why it's a gift. The way it's a curse now is every lunatic in the world used to have to write a letter to the editor. Well, now they can just form a hashtag and pick a target and then unite from all across the world. So the lunatics, actually, there aren't that many of them in terms of total numbers, but social media makes it seem like there are more than there are.
Here's how people justify that. It's what they're saying is way more damaging than you think it is, right? And we can't allow that. And then there's the fire in a crowded theater, which I see people say all the time now. And I don't know if they know the story of that, but that was said by Oliver Wendell Holmes to put a socialist protester against World War I in prison for life. That was what he said to justify that. So that was to go against anti-war liberals originally, that nonsense. And now it gets used by the other side. But everybody thinks that.
Megyn Kelly, who is a Fox News anchor, she makes $20 million a year on Fox. She has a book. She made $10 million a book advance for. She has a Twitter profile with over 1 million followers. She can go on TV and say whatever she wants, whenever she wants, both as a host of a show and as a guest. I don't want to hear Megyn Kelly cry about the big, mean cyberbullies.
Look, tech and social media, look, you could say whatever you want. There are people who have made it their life's work to sit in their basement and send anti-Semitic and homophobic and awful things to people all the time, right? There are people who just all day long that they just send out Nazi memes to Jews, and they just send out faggot this and faggot that to gay people, and they send out all kinds of stuff. Pick the minority, you pick whatever it is, everything. It's all out there, right? They can do it. They can do it. It's not fun getting that stuff. I get it, right? I get it and I see it and I look at it and I go, oh, well, that didn't really need to see that.
There was one particular damning incident where, talking Gulf War I now, when Clear Channel, who owned at the time maybe 1,300 radio stations or something around the country, had a list of songs Peace Train was on the list, I remember. I think Imagine by John Lennon was on the list. Imagine was Cat Stevens. Peace Train was Cat Stevens. All kinds of songs by groups like Rage Against the Machine and groups like System of a Down. And, A, who came up with this? And B, what criteria was used to put these songs? It's basically a blacklist.
You know what? Sit in your fucking room and tell me that you love Hitler. All right, I'll get over it. You're nobody. You're nobody doing nothing. So would it be better for society and for the world for me to come in and hunt you down and stop you from speaking? These people are just trolls. They just want to get a reaction out of people. And then of course, these people always give them the reaction. And then what does that do? It amplifies it even more. So I just ignore it. Every now and again, and I guess when I first got on Twitter and it was new, I would engage with these people a little bit. And then I realized I'm literally engaging with either Twitter eggs or someone who took the 1 second to put up a cat picture in their avatar. They're never real people. They're nobodies who just want to get a rise out of people who actually have put themselves out there.
If you ask me, there are two different groups. There's the big money group, and then there's the cultural groups, or the social justice warriors. We like to focus on the social justice warriors because anything cultural gets a rise out of people. But the big money is silencing people too.
There are all kinds of things that are taboo for a comedian these days, but then again, there's nothing that's taboo for a comedian.
Well, now it's gotten to the point where the comics will try to gauge whether or not what you're saying is politically correct and it's okay for them to laugh at it, which is never something we did. And there's even comics that will try to confront you afterwards and be like, you know what you said about such and such really wasn't the most, and it's like, I'm not here to be a fucking nice person. I'm here to work out these jokes, this isn't a dinner party.
You get some comedians who want to get on a high horse and want to pretend like a joke is not a joke. And you see that a lot. And it's like, dude, it's a joke. You understand how this business works, right? Like, you're not saying what you mean necessarily up there. Or sometimes you're saying something totally fucked up just to prove a point against it. And you're totally lost when you get to that point. When you get to the point where you're taking something is a joke seriously, what are you doing?
So, that's what's gotten so frustrating is you have comics actually trying to change what you say and monitor your speech. Even online, that's who most of my arguments have been with, with other comics that think that I'm not supposed to say certain things. I've had comics try to blackball me.
So what's happened in comedy now is it's really become more important than ever to really rely on your own integrity and your own vision. I tell young comedians all the time, it's very important to have a kind of manifesto about what it is. If you don't know exactly what it is that you want to do, at least know the kind of thing you don't want to do, because it all rests on your integrity, because there's a marketplace and an audience for everything. And if you're the kind of person that goes against the grain, you do not have to compromise any of what you want to do to find an audience. And I don't know that there's ever been a time like that.
I think it's almost like being a reporter. I think your responsibility is to talk about the stuff that's really going on. If that's what you call yourself, if there's comics that do just fun, zany, wacky stuff, and if that's what they choose to do, I think that stuff's fun too. Obviously, Carrot Top isn't, I don't think he has any responsibility to do anything but come up with cool props. That's kind of what his thing is, which I do like Carrot Top.
People today are ready to jump on you for pretty much anything you say that's out of line, or what they think is out of line, or whatever voices in their head say are out of line, which I don't necessarily know is bad. You don't want to piss people off, but on the other hand, part of your job is to push the boundaries a little bit of what you can say.
I can tell you, a younger crowd can't really take an offensive joke. An older crowd will take an offensive joke. And I think it's because they live through a different era of stand-up. They live through a different era of humor. Before, when you think about how just the relationship between a husband and a wife has changed on television, You know, you think about the honeymooners, you know, always threatening to send Alice to the moon, and then Ricky would sometimes spank Lucy. And then as we progress more and more and more and more, now you're more likely to see a woman slap a man on television.
I'm offended by. I turn on top 40 radio. I'm offended over and over again. I watch mainstream television. I'm offended over and over again. I hear Christianity shit. I hear this Muslim shit. I hear religion every day. I see In God We Trust on our money every day. I'm offended right and fucking left. I'm just not a little bitch about it.
Just making statements and getting applause breaks off of making statements. And it's like, that's great, but you didn't give a punchline. There's no joke there. All you said was, it's okay to be this, or I identify as this. And now people are clapping and you're acting like that's, you know, a good response. I'm not here to get, you know, a golf clap. I'm here to actually make people laugh, you know? And so I think, but like as far as like comics go, the main responsibility though is to make people laugh. That's the main responsibility.
I mean, there's a lot of social engineering that's gone on in this country. There's a lot of social engineering that goes on around the world, but I'm talking about us. So there's a lot of social engineering that's gone on. Is it all terrible? Not necessarily, but we do pay the price for it. And so you get a lot of younger comedians who won't go near certain topics or are very, very sensitive about offending somebody in the audience. And there's nothing wrong with the impulse of not wanting to offend somebody. So that's why I say to each their own. If that's the way you want to work, then that's the way you should work, absolutely. But to say that there's no place for the opposite of that is an unfortunate place to be. I think it's very limiting. I think it is small-minded and narrow-minded, and I think throughout history, it's always been the confrontational work in any art form that survives and makes and is remembered and makes any sort of difference in terms of spreading an idea.
It's coddling. It's hand-holding, but you know, I didn't realize until after I got out of college how much we were coddled and handheld.
Like, you know, this whole notion of rape jokes are a big thing, and triggers, trigger warnings, triggers. Oh my God. Everybody's got a trigger. Everybody's got a trigger. If you were poked in the eye by a guy wearing a green hat for the rest of your life, you might have a problem with green hats, but it's not our responsibility. This thing with rape jokes, I understand it's horrible, it's a horrible crime against humanity. It doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. Murder is a horrible crime against humanity, but I don't see anybody getting upset about somebody mentioning a murder in a joke or mentioning a guy being killed in a car accident in a joke. So it ultimately becomes the response to a very solipsistic worldview.
I think a lot of the issues that people have with comics have with each other is it's not that they don't like what someone else is saying, it's they don't like the fact that they can't say it.
One of the things that I've noticed changing in the comedy world is audiences. And I think this is true not only in comedy, but I think audiences in general for anything. I've noticed a sense of entitlement in audiences that's really disturbing. Audiences seem less and less like they want to discover whatever it is that any performer or performance chooses to give them, and they make their demands known that they want what they want. That's pretty new. I mean, there's always been, you know, people who heckle and have problems and walk out on shows and what have you, but the pendulum is swung to where, in a large segment of performance in any given audience, there are more people who want it to be about them than about the performer.
Or young people have this theory of the way that they think life is supposed to work out or it's gonna work out. And it's like, yeah, all these are great ideas for right now when you're young and you haven't been through anything. All of this makes a lot of sense in your brain right now. But once you actually get into life, once you actually start having to dig in and live it and kind of see how sometimes you're fucked mentally and you just come up with these things and you need to be able to express them and it shouldn't be wrong.
I definitely see other comedians censoring other people. But is it censorship or is it just expressing your opinion? Right? Like where I don't think it's censorship. Somebody could say, "Oh, you shouldn't say that joke," and I go, "Haha, go fuck yourself." It's not real censorship. This is not the government kicking down my door and saying, "You can't say that." This is some jack-off telling another jack-off they didn't like a joke.
I think people have always looked at comics to really tell them the truth, to really be able to see things in a way they don't, because comics see the world in a way that other people don't.
I don't find myself censoring myself. I find myself writing things knowing that some people are going to be upset.
A lot of times with audiences now, it's if they can't relate to what you're saying, instead of just trying to suspend their disbelief or go a little bit further as an audience and broaden their mindset, they pull back because, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with me.
Yeah, it's very disturbing to see, particularly at universities and in academia, to see speakers being deplatformed. I mean, we've even got to the point where there's buzzwords for these things now. To see speakers being deplatformed, I mean, to not even hear what an odious idea is before we censor it is pretty counterproductive for everybody.
It's interesting with the colleges because sometimes, and it all depends on the school, and as someone who went to a very small, very conservative women's college, the atmosphere of the school will definitely dictate what a comic can talk about. So sometimes I get to schools and like, you're fine, say whatever you want to say, we don't care if you curse, it doesn't matter. And then other schools are, you know, they'll tell you, don't curse, don't talk about sex, don't talk about birth control, don't talk about the gay community. And my question is, like, these are all college students, like they're all 18 to 20 something. All they do is have sex and drink.
Colleges were at one time the place you went where you could do the most aggressive countercultural comedy. So to see how it's become the antithesis of that is really, really disconcerting.
Every school has stipulations on what you can say and what you can talk about, and it is in your contract. And if you violate that, you will not get paid. No matter how far you traveled or whatever you did, you are not going to get paid. So I realized real quick, okay, cool, these are things I can't talk about? Nope, no problem, you know, because I have the two college sets. I have my regular college set and then my super clean college set. So I know what I have to do to make sure I get paid.
And I know some comedians who did colleges for a long time, and then, you know, there could be a video that goes up of a piece of material that maybe they would never have done at a college, but it's out there, and then the college bookers, who are also kids, by the way, you know, find it, ooh, we better not book him, and it's just become not worth it. It's almost become an existential nightmare to even think about doing colleges as a comedian.
I know personally I would love to go to a college that is like pro-activist and they do that kind of thing, so that I kind of immerse myself into something that I'm not necessarily used to, so that I get those different experiences, because I know that's what college is for, is to like experience new ways of life. And I have heard about that. Like UC Berkeley, we were learning about in US history and how like they're famous for their demonstrations. And definitely the colleges that I'm looking into are kind of more of those kind of colleges that would not necessarily protest, but campaign for what they believe in.
Well, it's interesting because the schools that I've worked in, usually they employ, because teachers don't have very much longevity, especially in New York City. So most of the people employed are fresh out of college. They're young, they're, you know, early to mid-20s. They've just been through university and they've been taught all of these, you know, these ideologies, and they want to bring it into their classroom. So they're bringing, like, I hear a lot about, you know, gender is a social construct, which to me, that's an ideology. That's nothing based on fact. And they're trying to bring this into the classroom, and they really are preaching it in the class because they truly believe that it's the truth. And you know what? I don't blame them, because they're young, they're naive. If you're in your early 20s, you're going to believe that if you've gone through the university, like you think your professors and what you learn there is hardcore fact. And they're bringing it into the classroom, and if my kid was in there, I would really be angry that they are teaching this as fact, and they should, like, that's how you get your A, is if you agree with what we're teaching you right now.
I think there's something wrong with American academic culture, and I think there's something wrong with universities. The tour has solidified my belief in this. It's not so much that professors on American campuses don't teach their students conservative and libertarian, free market, classical liberal points of view. It's that they don't even know them.
While free speech is expanding around the world, in American universities it's contracting. It's regarded as a danger.
Specifically on UC Irvine campus, it's the conservatives and the Jewish students that are silenced the most. They're the loudest right-leaning voices on campus, and the administration does not like that. So they'll support the left and they'll censor the right.
Free speech matters! Free speech matters! Free speech matters! Free speech matters!
I can't go to a college campus without bodyguards. That should say it all, and it's not just me. As you can see, I'm not an imposing physical threat to anyone.
Why are you doing that?
Hey, who are you with?
Not with anybody.
Why are you recording kids? Why are you recording people? Who are you with?
I'm not with anybody. I'm just a guy who heard about it and just wanted to check it out.
Why are you recording though? Stop.
Because I just wanted to come here and just take a peek.
Okay, but you're recording. It feels violating.
There are so many things you're not allowed to say in America today. They deal primarily with race, gender, sexual orientation, religion. Believe it or not, religion is something that has become taboo on many university campuses. You can't say anything that risks offending somebody. Now, I can't imagine ever saying anything that doesn't risk offending somebody. Why say something if it's so banal and mild that nobody could possibly get offended? You know, as a Socratic teacher for 50 years, my job was to challenge everybody's points of view. I tried to do it with a smile. I didn't do it maliciously. But there were no safe ideas in my classroom. There should never be a safe idea in any university classroom.
Well, interestingly, you know, when I travel to British universities, I'm sort of disappointed and irritated by the students. But in America, I'm much more disappointed and irritated by the professors, by the administrations of these colleges who are failing in their duties to educate these kids in so many different ways. When you look at, you know, these are smart young people who simply don't know anything. They come out of college dumber than when they went in.
The greatest threat to free speech today is not from the government. We have generally won that battle in the courts. The greatest threat to free speech today is from universities, because universities are the training ground for our future leaders. When I teach students at Harvard Law School and I look out and see 150 students in the class, I say, there's the future president. There's the future candidate of the opposing party. There's the Chief Justice 20, 30 years from now. Here's the Speaker of the House. Here's the editor of the New York Times. Here is a great filmmaker. The future leaders are in our classes. And the prohibitions, both self and administration afflicted on students, are creating a generation of spoiled brats, a generation of people who want to be protected from free speech, who go to mommy and daddy dean and say, we want to be free in our sex life, we want to be free to use drugs, we want to be free to do all those other kinds of things, drink ourselves into a stupor. But when it comes to free speech, please, daddy and mommy dean, protect us. We're so fragile. We need safe spaces. We need trigger warnings. We don't want to learn about the great writers because one of them may have said something that might offend me or make me think hard about some of the points of view that I've held. Look, for years I taught a class at Harvard University called Where Does Your Morality Come From? I taught it to freshmen, 18-year-old kids right out of high school. And I told them day one, this is your trigger warning. Everything you hold dear will be challenged in this class. There isn't a single idea that you have, a single point of view, which is going to be sacred. If you're religious, I'm going to challenge that. If you're an atheist, I'm going to challenge that. If you're anti-Israel, I'm going to challenge that. If you're pro-Israel, I'm going to challenge that. If you're an American patriot, I'm going to challenge. Everything's going to get challenged. You don't like it? Take a different teacher. But you're not going to get anything from me which is going to be kind of, oh, you're so great, you're so wonderful. Recently I taught in a high school. Kids were 13, 14, 15 years old. They were fantastic. They hadn't yet gotten ruined by college. They asked me the hardest questions. They were challenging me. I was challenging them. It was such an invigorating experience. And then I go to college and law school and I say, oh my God, what's happened to these students? They've lost their willingness to express controversial points of view.
Well, people on campus believe that you have a right to not be offended, which is not true. You don't have that right, but you do have a right for free speech. And instead, they're replacing that right not to be offended with your right to speak your mind, to speak freely. And that's not okay.
When I went to college in the 50s, which was the McCarthy era even, my professors, if you took one side, I was a Marxist at Columbia in the 50s. And if you took one side to an issue, whether it was pro or anti-Marxist or leftist, the professor would take the opposite. He would play devil's advocate. And that taught you how to think.
They've denied us funding. They've funded the left completely. They've punished the right, and when the left has done something comparable, they're nowhere to be found. They pretend they don't see it.
Free speech matters! Free speech matters!
One of the most interesting courses I taught, along with Professor Steven Pinker, a few years ago at Harvard, was a course called Taboo. We had 1,000 students almost. And it was what you can't teach in college, what you can't say in universities, what is banned, what is taboo. We had a great time exploring all the taboo issues that you can't talk about. And the students craved it. They had a safe space, to borrow their own term, in which they could express views that they were afraid to express, even in the dormitories, even at the lunchroom table.
It's not the administration that makes the school, it's the professors. So you know a lot of respect to them because they work really hard. But at the same time, there is some discrimination still here on college campuses. I took a writing class. The writing class was about social justice. So as you can imagine, a conservative opinion in that class isn't one that's going to be looked very nicely upon.
Well, there's a very exciting thing happening on campuses, and the numbers seem small compared to the social justice contingent, merely because we do have a bit of a mountain to climb to get there. But one thing that has struck me that I've been very encouraged by is a healthy sense of mischief and drama and fun in the College Republicans, the Young Americans for Liberty, you know, all these organizations that want to invite me because they want to stir things up a little bit. And this is, you know, I think this is much of the reason why many smart people like Donald Trump, because they enjoy sticking it to these people who have told us what we can say and think and do and what words we're allowed to use and all the rest of it. Now that stuff is endemic on American college campuses, but there is a small-ish but very rapidly growing body of students who are rediscovering the mischief and dissident spirit of the 1960s and 70s campus radicals. Now, of course, those guys were leftists, but that's because the establishment was conservative. Now the establishment is left-wing, and conservative students are rediscovering they are discovering perhaps for the first time, as conservatives at least, the joys of defiance, dissidence, and mischief.
I'm pessimistic about American universities because after 50 years of teaching at most major American universities, lecturing at virtually every American university, I've never met a less courageous group of people than tenured professors who don't have the courage to speak their minds and to speak their convictions, to alienate students, to alienate the dean, to alienate the president, to alienate the alumni. These are, with some striking exceptions, the most cowardly group of people I've ever experienced. These are people who are protected by tenure. They can't get fired. And yet, I'm afraid my student evaluations will suffer. Maybe I won't get promoted. I won't get admitted to this honor society. People won't like me. That's not what the job of a professor is. The job of a professor is to challenge.
This fascist left is most visible and vibrant on college campuses, but these are the leaders of tomorrow. So I think we are certainly on the threshold of a possible dark ages.
I think that young people around this nation need to step up and start saying what they believe, the things that they believe. When they don't like something, say it. When they like something, say it. When you have an opinion, voice it.
I had a student who registered for a class taught by a hard left professor who knew nothing about the Middle East, but who, because he was hard left, had to teach a course on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And my student friend looked at the syllabus and said, this isn't a course, this is propaganda. It's all anti-Israel propaganda. Don't you think you should include some material that's more centrist and more honest? The professor said, no, this is my class. The student looked at him and said, this is not your class. We're the students, it's our class. And so this student developed an online alternate syllabus where for everything the professor put on, which was left-wing propaganda, he had a centrist piece of writing that reflected a more truthful and balanced approach. By the end of the semester, more students were reading the student syllabus than the professor's syllabus. So you can fight back. You can fight your professors. Sure, they grade you in the end. And if you care only about your grades, that's a risky thing to do. You can fight back. Don't fight back by trying to get the professor fired or by trying to censor the professor. Fight back by showing the professor is wrong. And that's the greatest thing that we have, our ability to show that people who have different views from us are wrong. We have the burden of proving them to be wrong, and that's what free speech is all about. So students ought to take up the mantle and fight against false speech with true speech.
Freedom of speech to me is all about power. It's all about who controls the microphone, who has power, can dictate what other people are allowed to say. You can push back on the edges of free speech and sort of try and define, push back against people everyday things. You find that people fold very easily.
I should be able to say whatever I want, whenever I want, without fear of censorship or retaliation by the government or some cultural Marxist who's offended because I said the word faggot.
To make things, you need to hear what people have to say. To do anything, you need to hear what people have to say, even if you don't like it.
Free speech means to me the ability to go onto some bullshit social media platform, say my name is Scott Barrows and Muslims piss me off, or I'm Scott Barrows and the sky's fucking blue and I'm a male, you're a female, there's no in between. That's free speech.
I just think right now in the culture, it's just getting crazy. We can't even have conversations with each other. And so Mike and the rest of his crew are making this film, and we need to document what's happening. People are losing their livelihoods. They're losing their jobs because they're saying some statement or someone's dredging up some statement from their past. And it's getting to the point where we can't even have civil conversations with each other anymore.
I believe that, SJWs are trying to tell women who are not like-minded like them and are independent thinkers, they're trying to stifle us and keep us from being able to talk to other people about our beliefs. And I feel that in some point, even men are being stifled even more just because of gender.
There shouldn't be keywords that make somebody attack you. You know what I mean? That's wrong. I mean, because you're saying my words cause you to harm me or cause you to take a knife out and stab you. You know what I'm saying? And you're saying you're inciting hatred. How about people relax and just have a conversation?
It's a clash of ideas that allows for everybody to figure out if there's a better way than the status quo, or if maybe a way of doing things that we think might be worthwhile really isn't the way to go. More than anything, I think it's just each of us expressing ourselves and saying what we feel we need to say.
I don't see why people feel the need to be anonymous. Like I've looked at some of the comments people say all the time, like, I want to be anonymous so I can hide from my aggressors or whatever it is. If everyone had to walk around and be a person, which is real life, right? Like me and you can't hide who we are if we're walking down the street. So I might not walk by you and be like, die, faggot, die. It's easier when it's behind the internet, You have to actually be a person and actually care about what you're saying when you're you. You still might say that stuff face-to-face to somebody, but it's that courage. Like people are just too courageous, and to me, they're the cowards of society. I don't hide. If I want to say something, I'll say it.
The biggest threat I see to free speech is actually self-censorship. It's interesting. It started, I think, in the hallowed halls of Reddit and on the walls of Tumblr. But what started on, one side is a SJW movement and on the other side is an alt-right movement, has really kind of led to people saying that if something makes me feel uncomfortable, it should be shouted down. And I think the essence of why our founding fathers created this country was that sort of comfortability in Britain was really what oppression was all about.
Fight for free speech. Don't let free speech die. If you let free speech die, you're going to become like these countries in Europe, and you see where they're headed. Nobody wants to go down that route.
It's almost like you lose your individuality, in my opinion. If you're not allowed to say stuff, what's going to happen? We're going to have meetings in little rooms where we can all just say what we want, and then when we get outside, we can't.
Really dangerous when we look at people and say, we just want them to go away. We're going to censor them, we're going to quiet them, and pretend that they're gone. This worked in ancient times with ostracism. In the past, you could actually ostracize people, but you can't now. People don't go away, they just get angry and they organize and they become a lot stronger.
Well, the tech companies, I believe, should remain neutral as much as possible. And for the most part, this is something tech companies have historically been very good at doing up until recently, when they've sort of become more politically motivated. And I think part of that is because it appears that a very strong consensus is forming on the far left, and it's very lopsided in the far left's favor. So I think corporations are reacting to that by embracing it more.
Companies like Facebook and Google have a tremendous amount of influence, and we should keep that in mind as we're considering what we're reading and watching online.
Get over yourselves. Not everybody loves you. Not everybody's going to be nice to you. Not everybody's going to kiss your butt. The only reason you want to censor free speech is because you don't like it. You're not trying to censor free speech that you agree with and trying to silence people who you disagree with. Get over yourselves. I get attacked every day of my life. I'm over it. It's okay. People don't have to like you. People don't have to like me. Learn to tolerate dissent. If people are wrong, speak out against what they're wrong about. Don't take things personally. But again, just get over yourselves.
Today is going to be a day that we finally put an end to political correctness across the United States of America. People will finally be able to express their opinions without worrying about looking over their shoulder and people wanting to attack them or people silencing them for having these opinions. I want everyone to know in this country today that we will be greater than we ever were before, and we will win.
We're self-silencing ourselves, and I think all it takes is a small number of people to break through, and hopefully the rest will follow.
There's a great story of a great Jewish legend that in the Warsaw Ghetto, one Passover, a father and a son were sitting emaciated, haven't eaten in days. And it was Passover night. Their father's wife already passed. The mom, the sisters, the brothers, all gone. All that was left from this family was the son and the dad. And the father and the son are doing the 4 questions. There are 4 questions traditionally by the Haggadah, by the Seder, by the Passover feast. The children ask the father. And he asks the 4 questions, and before the father gives the Avodim Hayinu, that mysterious answer, the son says, "Father, I have a 5th question." And the father says, "What's the 5th question? There's no 5th question." He says, "Well, there is for me. My 5th question is, will I be here next year to ask the 4 questions? And will you be here next year to answer them?" And the father paused, and the angelic bodies came down from heaven just to hear what possible answer this father could say. And the father thinks for a moment, he looks at the son, and he says, "I don't know if you're going to be here to ask the questions next year. I don't know if I'm going to be here to answer the question next year. But what I do know is that next year, and the year after that, and 100 years after that, there will always be a child asking these questions. And there will always be a father answering them. That the Jewish people will always persevere." And using that as a springboard to free speech, I don't know how this current muddy and somewhat cancerous and poisonous environment of restricting within our social contract and even in some ways legally our freedom of speech. I don't know how it will end. I don't know if we will win this battle, but the battle will be won. Freedom of speech will persevere. Idea and ideas will always persevere over muzzling ourselves.